الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا. الحمد لله الذي نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. عما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحديث هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Indeed, all praises for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We seek His guidance, we seek His forgiveness, we put our faith in Him and our reliance upon Him. And we seek refuge in Allah from the evil consequences of our actions. Whomsoever Allah has guided, that there is no one to mislead him. And whomsoever Allah has allowed to go astray, that there is no one to guide him. And we bear witness and we testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. And that Muhammad, the son of Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is His slave and His messenger. I remind myself as I remind you as we begin the khutbah for today that every word that I am speaking is being recorded by the angels and I'll be asked about on the day of judgment. And likewise, every word that you are listening to today in today's khutbah, you too will be asked about on the day of judgment. All praises for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who has given the capacity in our lungs and our limbs for us to gather today on the day of gathering, Yawm al-Jum'ah, so that we could fulfill His commandment where He subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, race and rush to the remembrance of your Lord, so that today we can be reinvigorated in our iman as individuals, as a community, and as a society at large. We sit here today on January 11th in the Gregorian calendar. It's an important mark because sometimes, the turn of a new chapter, the turn of a new year means that we can put the past behind and move forward with a renewal, with a rebirth of sorts. And I want to share a narration that's in our books about a very prolific scholar who started off as a highway robber. He started off as a highway robber. He used to rob the caravans that used to be traveling. And he was well known throughout Arabia. And one of his habits were that as the nightfall was coming, he would go seek out the love of his life and go to her house and observe her. And he would do this on a daily basis. And then at night, he would be in the darkness of the night, stealing from the people, robbing the people. On one particular occasion, he goes to the house of this woman to do and observe what he normally does, this habit of his. And someone is observing Qiyamul Layl at the house. And they're reciting the verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, has the time not come for the believers' hearts to be humbled, and so that they can seek what is revealed of the truth, meaning the Quran? And immediately, you talk about sami'na wa ta'ana, listen to this, immediately as he heard these verses, something changed inside of him. There was a spark inside of him that changed almost immediately, and he responds, Bala ya Rabbi. Of course, my Lord. and he was changed. And he leaves the site of this house, and he goes out, and he's traveling, and he's looking for campfire, and he finds a couple of travelers that have stopped and they've stationed themselves, and they are now talking, and they are disputing amongst themselves, should we stay here tonight, or should we get going? Because you know that famous robber, that famous thief, he might come and get us. This is his region, this is the area that he patrols, and it might not be worth it to stay here. And he starts to think to himself, subhanAllah, what kind of an individual am I? What kind of a person am I? That people's lives and people's property, they're not safe with me. What kind of a wicked human being have I become that I have done and inflicted so much harm on humanity that this is the name and the reputation that I carry with myself? And he vowed to himself to be changed forever. And this is none other than Fudayl ibn Iyad, rahmatullahi alayhi, one of the most prolific scholars that if you look at some of the books of Tazkiyah, he has narrated dozens and dozens of statements if you study him with any shape. His name often comes up. And so you see how a person's life is completely turned around. The same goes for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, who was out to assassinate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're talking about the complete other end of the spectrum. And every single one of us, when we, when January 1st hit, perhaps a lot of us set resolutions that we're going to change ourselves. We're going to make ourselves better. There's a social media app called Strava. They studied 31.5 million people. It's a social media platform for athletes. And studying, this is not a small sample size, 31.5 million people. They said that January 12th, which is tomorrow, January 12th, they pinpointed is the exact day that most people, whatever resolution that they've set for themselves, starts to waver and wane off. They pinpointed the exact day because they see it in the app, that activity level has gone down. And as a matter of fact, that by the February 1st, 80% have given up on their resolutions all over, completely. And now they're repeating the same cycle. And then they found two things that help. One is the company that you keep, meaning the friends that you have that motivate you and support you in your goals. And then the second thing that they found is your environment, is your masjid. Outside of the work, outside of the home, what's your third space? Is your third space Panera Bread? Is your third space Starbucks? Or is your third space the masjid? What's that third place that you go to where family life and spiritual life connect? Is it the masjid? Is that on your priority list? They say that if you want to judge a man or a woman by where they stand with Allah, then, or how Allah stands with them, then look at their calendar and look at their bank account. How they spend their time and how they spend their money. Is Allah a priority for them? And so many of us may have set resolutions. I want to weigh X amount. I want to have Y amount in the bank account. Our beloved brother Faraz last week talked about a lot of this, right? Hitting every aspect of your life, relationships, financial, but most importantly, spiritual. How many of us set goals for the hereafter? How many of us set goals for the hereafter? Tell you about an ordinary man who was extraordinary. You and I, we may make the argument that, look, if you try to compare me with the Prophet ﷺ, listen, I can't split the moon with the pointing of an index finger. I'm not like Musa alayhi, I can't take my staff and split the Red Sea. I don't have that mu'jiza. I don't have that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now look at the people, the company that you keep, that were around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's sitting in a gathering. He's sitting in a gathering and he says to all of them that on this day, every single one of you have been repaid except for one of you, and that's Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. That is Abu Bakr. On the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is going to repay him. Why was this man so high above all of the other companions? and yet he was an ordinary man like you and I. There was an instance where the Prophet ﷺ says, how many of you have followed a funeral today? How many of you have fed the needy? How many of you have visited the sick? How many of you are fasting? Every single time, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's hand goes up. You know what time of the day this was? It was Salatul Fajr. Salatul Fajr. All the companions are looking at themselves that this man is something else. He is extraordinary. And he created that sort of tie that would bring the people. As a matter of fact, it's related that Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq anhu, out of the Ashara Mubashirin, the 10 that were promised Jannah by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 6 of them were brought to Islam through Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And so he says that on that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself will repay Sayyidina Abu Bakr. The scholars distilled his traits and characteristics and attributes to 2 main things that we can learn from today. Because we can talk till we're blue in the face about how amazing this man was. But 2 of the things that he fashioned his life around, one was a verse from Surah Al-Waqi'ah, وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ فِي جَنَّاتِ النَّعِيمِ. Those who are the first and the foremost will be the first and the foremost. And these are the people that are the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will be with him in paradise. What does it mean that those that are the first and the foremost will be those that are the first and the foremost? Meaning those that are the first and the foremost in this dunya, in their rituals of ibadah, in their drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in every single aspect of their life, how they advocate and represent Islam, right? That he was the first and foremost in that, and that they will be risen as the first and the foremost in the afterlife. What does that tell us as Muslims, as believers, here in 2019, living in America? What does that tell us? That tells us that for you young people, every single one of you, you cannot afford to be mediocre. Mediocrity should not be even a part of your vocabulary. You have to excel in every single thing that you do. You look to the right, you look to the left, you all come from good families, mashallah. And your parents are intelligent individuals, and this is the community that we live in. And you see that some other students are smarter than you. You might just have to work harder. Some are more talented. You might have to put more time in. But regardless, there's a bar that's been set, and we have to hit that bar, right? We have to hit that bar of excellence. They say that when talent stops working, hard work keeps on working, right? You put the work in, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put the barakah in it, right? It means that we have to be excellent in our jobs, in our professions. That if I'm a physician, if I'm a doctor, I can't just be any run-of-the-mill doctor. I have to be the one that gets recognized by the publications, and my name with my beard, and it says Muhammad on the magazines. Let the people see that. Let them see that. Not for your ego, but to raise the banner of La ilaha illallah. When the Muslims came to Andalus, right, they were known as a mark of beauty, the way that they kept their houses, the way that they dressed, the way that they presented themselves, to the point where the outsiders would look at them in awe and say, I want to be like these people. There's something different about them. They're a landmark of beauty. So this was the first lesson that we get from this man's life. As-sabiqun, that he strived to be the first and the foremost. The second lesson that we get from Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is that he followed a cornerstone hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to the T. Those that lead to goodness will also be given that reward, right? So the first talks about an internal, you improving yourself and being the best that you can in your professional life, in your financial life, in your spiritual life, in your family life, in all of those things. That you're the best husband that you can be. You're the best mother that you can be. You're the best wife that you can be. You're the best son or daughter that you can be. You're the best student. In every hat that you wear the best hat. That's the first part. The second part is that you become a magnet of good so that other people, you can bring them towards it. That it's not an insular thing, that it's something that you project outwardly so that people would want to be that way. So that people would want to be that way. They question, why do you behave this way? It's very different from how everybody else acts. One simple thing that you can take from this is generosity and selflessness. Generosity and selflessness. They said that the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, as you know, many of you that have traveled to Mecca and Medina, Mecca is almost always hot. It's almost always hot. But if you go to Medina, it gets into the 60s. It gets cooler. And in the mornings especially, and we're talking about 1400 years ago, in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, you don't have heating, you don't have cooling, you don't have HVAC. And it used to be cold to the point when the Nabi ﷺ was leading the prayers, he would be shivering. And you know that he didn't have many clothes. Our Prophet ﷺ was not a rich person, although he could have been. And that many of his clothes had patches that he would sew onto them himself. And when this was found out, a woman that lived in Medina sewed a cloak, a beautiful cloak for him. And he wore this to Fajr. And after the prayer, as was his custom, he sits down and he's looking at his beautiful companions. And his custom was to ask everyone, has anybody seen a dream? Does anybody have any requests? Does anybody want to share anything? And there was a Sahaba, and his name is not mentioned in the narration, but there was a companion who said, Ya Rasulullah, these days I am extremely cold. These days I'm extremely cold. All of the other companions, they put their heads down and they nodded because they knew. They knew the Prophet ﷺ never says no to people. When somebody asks him of something, he automatically gives it. Yes, there's justification that it's cold and I'm shivering, and let me take care of me first. But he was not that. And today we live in a diametrically opposite society that's telling you iPhone, iPad, I this, I everything. And yet he was about you and them. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They are in need of it, and yet they give from it. They are in need of that thing themselves. This was told about the Ansar, this verse. They are in need of it themselves, and yet, despite being in need of that, they're giving it from themselves. Being generous, tahadu. Give gifts amongst each other, and your love will grow. These were some of the secrets of the life of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Right? It said that you took his iman on one side of the scale, and you took the iman of the entire community of Sahaba, not us. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about, the Aisha al-Mubashirin, the top companions. The Prophet ﷺ said that his iman would outweigh everybody else. All of the good that they're doing, many of them that they're doing, they watched him doing it and they would follow that. They watched the Prophet ﷺ doing it and they would follow that. And guess whose scales it's going into? Guess whose account it's going into on the Day of Judgment? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people beacons of hope, beacons of goodness, beacons of people that live our lives the way that the Prophet ﷺ led his life, and be people that not only set materialistic and dunyawi goals, but people that strive constantly for the akhirah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa habibina maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran wa ba'd. The Prophet ﷺ, we hear this oft quoted hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you has truly believed until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And the same goes for the sisters. What you love for your brother, what you love for yourself. The scholar said, this is the minimum requirement. This is the minimum prerequisite, is to love for your brother what you love for yourself. They said that there's another level beyond this, it's called ithar. which is to want more for your brother than you want for yourself. And I'll give you a story in my personal life where I absolutely fell flat on my face and failed at this. One of my uncles in our family, he's the patriarch of our family, if you will. We came here from Pakistan in 1987. He was the main person that sponsored everybody from Pakistan to come here. And everybody would make a stop at his house, live there for several months. There would be 3 or 4 families living there. Many of you are smiling because you've probably gone through the same experience. And then eventually when you could get on your own feet, you would move out and get your own place. And so he was that person in our family. When we have weddings and our cousins get married, the imam does the nikah. I usually give a talk about marriage in Islam, and then we bring him up saying that this is all his fault that we're all here. And he, we had a Honda Odyssey, a minivan, right? We had 3 kids, alhamdulillah. And, I threw in the towel once upon a time and got a Honda Odyssey. And he asked, can I borrow this? Through my parents. He didn't ask me directly. He said, Shomail has a minivan. He's the only one in the family. Can I borrow this? We have some people coming over from from far away. We're going to be going to Washington, D.C. And there's a part of me, there's a debate that starts to take place in my head. That, look, the weekend's coming up. We have to lug the kids around here and there, and we need the van. It's a functional thing. We actually need it to take the kids around. And there's another part of me that's fighting with myself, saying, why can't I be that person that just lovingly says, absolutely, you did so much for us, you take it. And so I go downstairs, my parents happen to be over, and my father is telling me that, he's requesting it. Have you made your decision, and are you going to hand the keys over? And I said, and I start going through all the hoops and the hurdles and why it's difficult and so on and so forth. Whereas I could have easily given it up, and figured out other ways. And my dad says, "Tiga, nahi dena to nahi do." Now, those of you that speak the language know what that means. When a Pakistani father says, "Nahi dena to nahi do," if you don't want to give it, don't give it. That means you better give it. You 100% better give it, or else you'll be facing something else. And so, I give it up, but my niyyah was still not there. And I think back later and reflecting on this hadith, love for your brother what you love for yourself. And I asked myself, where did I fall flat on this? And I have to get better. We all have to get better as individuals and as a community. Hassan al-Basri, and I'll leave you with this, inshallah. Hassan al-Basri, rahmatullahi alayhi, the powerhouse scholar. He reached such a height of eminence that somebody approached him and says to him that, listen, Hassan, you have lived, Shaykhna, a very, very robust and fulfilled life. How did you accomplish this? And Hassan says, the scholar, he says that I realized I came to 4 conclusions about my life. And let me tell you what they are. The first one, he says, is that I realized that my Lord, my Creator, has demanded certain actions of me. And so I made my life busy with those actions. We all have our Google Calendar, our Outlook calendar, right? And we time block different things. We have time for sleeping. We have time for work. We have time for this. We have time for that. 168 hours a week, every single person has. How much of that do you take to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because if it's 0, the unfortunate thing is, anybody that knows multiplication here knows that anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So even if you do a little bit, as Hazrat Aisha said, that the best of the actions are the ones that are done consistently, even if they're small. We're saying that, is it part of your schedule? He said that I got busy with these actions. The second realization that I came to in my life is said that all the money that I'm going to make in this life, every single penny of it is written down to the last dinar and dirham. All of it. And so I stopped worrying about it. It's not to say, and don't confuse this, not to work for it. You still have to be people that work. You still have to be people that toil. You still have to be people that put in the effort. But what you're going to make at the end of the day, through your jobs, through your investments, through whatever it is, it's already written down to the last penny. And so he said, I took that worry out of my mind. That was the second realization I came to. It was another thing that's off my back. The third realization that I came to is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Raqib. He is watchful. That He is watching my every single action. Now, when you're in biology class and you're looking for the mitochondria inside the cell, you're looking for the nucleolus inside of the cell, you're searching for the small little thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching every single one of our actions in that manner. All anthropomorphism aside. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching every single action of ours. Right? So He said, I became very watchful of what I said and what I did. And the fourth realization that I came to is that the meeting with my Lord, just that today is Friday and tomorrow is Saturday, how many of us, and you don't have to respond, but we know for sure that when the sun sets and the sun rises tomorrow is Saturday. In the same way, He said, the meeting with my Lord is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's coming. The way that Saturday is coming tomorrow. It's a day that's going to exist. I will be in front of my Creator without a veil, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And all of my actions will be presented. All of my actions will be presented. And that day is coming. He said, I started to prepare for that day. I started to prepare for that day. It's a very comprehensive and beautiful advice by Hassan al-Basri on how we should live our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability and the tawfiq to inculcate this into our lives and also share this with our families. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة.